Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Bucks podcast, we're going to give our final look at the Buccaneers and Colts matchup for this weekend. We're going to talk about some Hall of Fame semifinalists and not so semifinalists. We're going to give all of our predictions, and I'm going to criticize David's Thanksgiving takes. All that and more on this episode of the Locked On Bucks podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucks podcast, and thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen or first watch every day. I am James Yarko, joined as always by David Harrison. I shouldn't say as always. This is the first episode we've done together since Monday.
It's as always. We're together in spirit, even if we're not together physically.
That is true, and we still talk about each other on our solo shows. Whether that's good or bad, we will find out. But you can check out everything David and I are doing over at BucksNation.com. Follow along on Twitter at LockedOnBucks, at JRCO_Bucks, at DHarrison82, and at Bucks_Nation. This episode brought to you by our friends at Stat Hero. Stat Hero is the first of its kind daily fantasy sports platform where it's you versus the house in head-to-head fantasy matchups, winner take all. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked on. Use promo code locked on for a 100% deposit match.
Thanks again to all of you out there in Bucks Nation for making the Locked On Bucks podcast your first listener watch every single day. Hopefully you have enjoyed your Thanksgiving festivities, or maybe you're still enjoying your Thanksgiving festivities, James. I know you and your family are technically celebrating Thanksgiving on Friday because you can get the family together. So hopefully you have a good time. Happy Thanksgiving to you, brother. Appreciate everything that you have brought into my life and my sports ventures, and happy to call you a friend, brother, and partner in all of this garbage content that we produce for people to take in. Speaking of garbage news, Mike Evans not practicing again on Thursday, at least in the session open to media. So at least a little bit of, possibly a limited designation will be passed out. But from what the media saw, and that is via Rick Stroud on Twitter, and also via Rick Stroud on Twitter, because we don't have official Thursday reports right now. Vita Vea and Devin White both practicing. That means more than just working on the side or stretching. They're actually doing drills and actually going through part of the game plan prep. So that's great news. Official designations, of course, for all Buccaneers players, including Antonio Brown, who I'm not sure I'm all that confident, James, that he's going to play. Will come out on Friday ahead of Sunday's game. And then for the Colts side of things, not a lot of social media activity happening before we record this episode, but Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard, definitely the two players on the Colts side of things that you want to keep an eye on. The benefit they have, of course, is that they're not traveling, so they don't have to worry about flights and swelling and blood pressure and all this other stuff. So they have a little bit of an advantage there. But obviously, if they're missing Quentin Nelson and Darius Leonard, that's going to be a huge blow for the Indianapolis Colts' chances of beating Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which, of course, we're here for every day.
Yeah, on Wednesday night, Bruce Arians on Sirius XM radio said that he thinks Antonio Brown is going to return against the Falcons next week. So no Antonio Brown this week. Definitely want to keep an eye on Mike Evans, Vita Vea, and Devin White. But I'm confident Mike Evans is going to play. I'm confident Chris Godwin is going to play. He's still dealing with that foot injury. And then having Vita Vea and Devin White both practicing on Thursday, definitely a positive sign, as the Bucs are going to be going up against the number one running back in the NFL. All due respect to Derrick Henry. Bro, you haven't been on the field, and Jonathan Taylor is crushing it right now. So yeah, it's unfortunate that Antonio Brown won't be on the field for the Bucs in a big road game. The Bucs obviously have struggled on the road this year. They could have used Antonio Brown in this one, especially against a susceptible Colts secondary. But that, to me, means it's going to open things up for the tight ends. The Colts are 31st in the NFL against the tight end position. So Gronk being healthy, mixing some O.J. Howard, some Cameron Brate, the Bucs might be exposing the middle of that field quite a bit, especially if Darius Leonard is out.
Absolutely. And I mean, Darius Leonard, first of all, as a football purist, I love the guy. I love the player.
Yeah.
I love what he does on the field. But as a person who covers the Buccaneers and watches the Buccaneers closely, I mean, it's been a little while, but you remember what he did the last time we saw Darius Leonard playing against Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
It was 2 or 3 interceptions, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A touchdown?
Absolutely. And granted, the caliber of quarterback play at the time, not Tom Brady's level, which there's a lot of quarterbacks that aren't Tom Brady's level, so it's not a shot. But I mean, I don't want to see Darius Leonard play the Buccaneers again. Like, I don't
No.
want to say I have PTSD, but I definitely have some anxiety going on from Darius Leonard playing. Hopefully, he's healthy, of course. But I mean, if they need to hold him out for precautionary reasons, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, they're in the playoff hunt now. Maybe you want to make sure that Leonard is healthy for
Yeah.
the stretch run. But to that quarterback's credit, the Bucks did come back and win that game against the Indianapolis Colts.
That's true, and that was part. I mean, we're talking about Jameis Winston, right? That was part of the excitement of the Jameis Winston era. Is
sure.
You never knew when things were going to go sideways, right? But you also never knew when things were going to magically come back on course and just go amazingly. So, I mean, it was a fun time. Can't throw any shade at James. Hopefully, he's healing up very nicely after his surgery. But yeah, I mean, just the last time we saw the Colts play this Bucks team, things didn't go exactly swimmingly. But getting the W at the end of the day is the main priority. I think that's a lesson to take from that game and from a lot of these games. And if the Buccaneers can continue on this trajectory of not shooting themselves in the foot as badly as they have before. I mean, I think outside the first quarter, right, of the Giants game, the Buccaneers basically played a relatively clean game. I don't know if I can say that 100%, but for the most part, played a pretty clean game for the last 3 quarters of that game. And you go back to Kansas City last year, played a terrible first quarter, played a really good 3 quarters, and that really kind of sparked the winning streak that we saw lead them to the Super Bowl. So I don't know, maybe we like drawing correlations to 2020 because it gives us more confidence that another Super Bowl trip is incoming. So maybe that's correlation. 3 clean quarters against the New York Giants versus 1 not so clean quarter. And maybe that's going to be what they need to get over the hump.
Yeah. And full disclosure, we're recording this episode a little after noon on Thanksgiving Day. So make sure you're keeping an eye on the injury reports as they come out via social media, because by the time you're watching or listening to this, we'll already have the Thursday reports out there, and you may even have the Friday reports out there as well. So yeah, you want to keep an eye on Devin White, Vita Vea, Quentin Nelson, Darius Leonard moving forward as we head into the weekend. Something else, David, to keep your eye on is this wonderful, wonderful new site, and that is, of course, Stat Hero. No one plays daily fantasy sports to lose. Winning feels so much better, but traditional fantasy sports are a long-term losing proposition because you never know who or what you're up against. Stat Hero is the first of its kind daily fantasy sports platform where it's you against the house in head-to-head fantasy matchups, winner take all. Here's the crazy part. Stat Hero shows you their lineups before you play, and you handpick the team you want to face one-on-one. This never-before-seen innovation of a fantasy sports and sports betting hybrid has Stat Hero players clocking odds that are 4 times better. Why? Because you don't have to compete against thousands of experts or unknowns. Stat Hero puts you in control of your fate. With Stat Hero, you're in control of the stakes. You decide how much you're going to play for, and Stat Hero has no choice but to take it because they are daring you to beat them. Stat Hero head-to-head is what daily fantasy should be, one-on-one. I am diving in to Stat Hero for the first time this weekend. Really interested to see how it goes, but I like my odds because I already do semi-well in those massive matchups when you're going up against guys with algorithms and you just don't know what they're doing. I'll let you know how I do with Stat Hero, but you can sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked-on and use promo code locked on for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/locked-on. Use promo code locked on for a 100% match. stathero.com/locked-on, promo code locked on. Terms and conditions do apply.
Segment 2 here at the Locked On Bucks podcast, wrapping up the week, giving our final preview of this weekend's matchup between your Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Indianapolis Colts. Thank you again, Bucks Nation, for making us your first listen or your first watch every single day. Wherever you're downloading this, wherever you're listening to this, streaming it, however you're doing it, please click subscribe, click follow, let us know what you think of the show, what you think about your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you can follow us on Twitter at dharrison82, at jarco_Bucks, and at Locked On Bucks. Everything we're writing about your Buccaneers can be found at bucksnation.com, on Twitter at Bucks_Nation. Speaking of Bucks and things that we've written about, James, Hall of Fame lists are starting to come out. The semifinalists have come out for the modern era. Semifinalists have come out. Rondé Barber is once again a Hall of Fame semifinalist. I think everybody expected that. Simeon Rice is not. And I know every year that Buccaneers fans get a little bit more frustrated, a little bit more up in arms about Simeon Rice. But first, let's talk about Rondé Barber. He was in the press box, or not in the press box, in a luxury box, right? Owner suite or wherever they put them up. Mike Allstott, Derek Brooks, Warren Sapp. I tweeted it from the Locked On Bucks Twitter account, I think, during the game. Champions in the box, champions on the field, champions just everywhere in Raymond James Stadium on Monday night. And it was a great environment to be in as John Lynch got his Hall of Fame ring. What are your thoughts on Rondé Barber? Obviously, we both think Rondé Barber should be in the Hall of Fame, but let's put on our best Ira Kaufman hat, or whoever's giving the speeches now in the selection boardroom. And what do you think are Rondé Barber's chance of legitimately making the Hall of Fame this year?
This year, I don't think he's going to make it. As much as I think Rondé Barber is a Hall of Famer, I don't know if he gets in. And, I realize people you're supposed to make the Hall of Fame argument based on individual performance, but it's really hard to get 4 Hall of Famers in from one defense that only came away with 1 Super Bowl, right? I mean, four Hall of Famers from one particular defense, period, is going to be a tall task. So you take a look at what Rondé did. He revolutionized the nickel corner. He's the only member in the NFL of the 40-40 club with 40 interceptions, 40 sacks. I'm pretty sure that's right. Or he might be the only member of the 45-40 club, whatever it is. He was an absolute weapon. He was a weapon in the passing game. He was a weapon at getting after the quarterback. But as far as his odds are concerned, I'll be real surprised if Rondé gets in this year. He may be a candidate that we're looking at a John Lynch-esque run of so close, but yet so far. And it's going to take one of those weaker class years for him to get the bump to be able to be inducted.
Yeah, I mean, the list is really long, and I mean, we can rattle it all up, but really I just want to kind of focus on the cornerbacks, really the defensive backs, right? Because they have Rondé Barber listed on the NFL website, Pro Football article, as a cornerback / safety, because he did obviously play some safety. But you've got cornerback Eric Allen joining him on that list. You got safety Leroy Butler, and you've also got safety Darren Woodson. So those are your 3 defensive backs on this or on this list of semifinalists for this year, and those are all 3 very good players, and they're all going to have their own right. And there's kind of, I don't know how true like the conspiracy theory of it really is, but there's kind of been this notion that like 1 safety per class or 1 DB per class, and like no more than that. So I mean, when you look at Eric Allen and you look at Darren Woodson, Darren Woodson obviously I think has probably, if I had to rank the unbiased, just stereotypical resumes, I think Darren Woodson's probably got the lead there. But then you look at some of the other names on this list. I'm an Eddie George guy. The Houston Oilers running back, and the Tennessee Oilers as well, because I refuse to call Tennessee Titans. Torrey Holt, Andre Johnson's on there. Devin Hester, who obviously helped kind of revolutionize. I mean, linebacker Sam Mills is a guy who did so much. Steve Smith, if he goes in the Hall of Fame, I might just boycott the entire thing, to be honest with you. Not that he doesn't necessarily deserve it, but I just don't like Steve Smith. I don't think I'm alone on that one either. So there's a lot of deserving names. But before we get to the Simeon Rice conversation real quick, James, I know you have some numbers to drop on people, which I'm incredibly excited for. 7 first-year eligible players. And maybe I'm alone on this, and I want your thought on this, and people watching on YouTube, I want your comments on this as well in the comment section. If you're listening, by all means, tweet at me, DM me, email us, leave a voicemail. The thing about first ballot Hall of Famers, like, it's kind of like, if you're a Hall of Fame caliber player, does it really matter if you get on the 1st, 5th, 7th ballot or whatever? I think it does. And I think the first ballot Hall of Fame selection should be reserved for the greatest of the great. Like, everybody in the Hall of Fame is supposed to be the greatest players to ever strap on pads, right? And I got that. But I'm talking about the greatest of the great, like to quote Men in Black, the best of the best of the best, sir, right? Tom Brady. Like, that's a first ballot Hall of Famer. So on this list, you've got DeMarcus Ware, Devin Hester, and Andre Johnson. You've got Anquan Boldin, Robert Mathis, Steve Smith, and Vince Wilfork. The closest first ballot Hall of Famer on there, James, to me, is DeMarcus Ware. But I don't even know if my own personal, and this is just me, and maybe I'm just a get off my grass type of moment, but I don't know that even DeMarcus Ware meets the criteria that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and it's funny you say DeMarcus Ware, because you rattled off those names, and the one that I thought should, if you're going to pick one, was Robert Mathis. So the fact that we already kind of see things differently, I agree with you 100%. The first ballot hall guys need to be those best of the best of the best. The Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, the Brett Favre's, the Randy Mosses, the LaDainian Tomlinsons, Barry Sanders, those kinds of players, Deion Sanders, the guys that you name a position, and those are the players that immediately come to mind. Because if I say, defensive end,
Right.
Robert Mathis and DeMarcus Ware are not the first 3, 4, 5 names that are going to come to mind.
Unless you're a Broncos or Colts fan, or maybe a Cowboys fan, right? So
right, sure. But it's like, if you remove your personal team bias from the conversation, those are not the names that immediately come to mind at those positions. So I agree with you that first ballot designation, full disclosure, Calvin Johnson should not have been a first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion.
Absolutely not. And I almost wonder, like, me personally, and again, this is just me kind of dreaming, right? I almost think that for a first ballot guy, the criteria should be different. Like, you shouldn't have the same criteria as everybody else. You were first time on the ballot, you should need more of the votes, or more, you should have to meet more of the standard to be a first ballot guy. That's just kind of the way I look at it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving over to the Simeon Rice conversation, you and I were talking before recording. Simeon Rice probably is never getting into the Hall of Fame. And
do you have a bunch of numbers, James?
I do.
Let me cut you off real quick, very rudely, because my take on this is going to be very quick.
Yeah.
And the last time I dropped an opinion or an analysis that Buccaneers fans didn't like, I heard about it, so I'm expecting to hear about it again. Right now, like, I don't think Simeon Rice is ever getting the Hall of Fame. You kind of just said that, right? But here's the thing. Simeon Rice is not in the Ring of Honor, correct?
Correct.
Until the Buccaneers put him in the Ring of Honor, there's no reason to put him in the Hall of Fame, because if your own franchise isn't saying that you're one of the best in the franchise, why would the NFL say you're one of the best in the NFL? And that could be a little unfair sometimes, right? Because the Bucs aren't going to put like 7 guys in the Ring of Honor. Like, next year, Simeon Rice go in the Ring of Honor. And we know that, like, when they put John Lynch in the Ring of Honor, a lot of people were like, yeah, they're trying to give him that push. When they put Rondé Barber in the Ring of Honor, like, they're trying to give Rondé a little bit of extra meat on his resume. And I get that. So if this franchise has gone and taking steps to give other people like John Lynch, Rondé Barber more meat on their Hall of Fame resumes, why haven't they done it for Simeon Rice? And it's not that he's not a great player or greatly appreciated within the franchise, celebrated, all that stuff, but maybe it's because he wasn't as impactful as some of these other guys. And we talked about before, 4-3 defense, right? Name the fourth defensive lineman that played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during that stretch. Most people can't. And if you have 2 Hall of Fame defensive linemen, Warren Sapp and Simeon Rice, you should probably be able to name the other 2 guys, because they benefited from those a lot and they probably had a good amount of production. But the fact that you have 1 Hall of Fame defensive lineman and the other guys benefited from that Kobe-like performance, I think that kind of speaks volumes a little bit. But yeah, until Simeon Rice is in the Ring of Honor, I don't even think this is a conversation worth having anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a matter of prioritizing different people ahead of Simeon Rice. You have your Allstotts and your Lynches and your Brookses and your Sapps and your Barbers, because those guys were, matter of factly, more impactful for the Buccaneers than Simeon Rice. That's not to say Simeon wasn't impactful, because he absolutely was, but you're not going to put Simeon Rice in before you put in Jimmy Giles or Leroy Selman or, Mike Allstott. Maybe you put him in ahead of Monty Kiffin, but Monty Kiffin did a lot for this team. So there could be some reasons there. But yeah, I dove into some numbers, because the 2 comparisons that always come to mind when you talk about Simeon Rice, and he had a stretch there of dominance, and maybe it's as simple as he had such an unceremonious end to his career because he had just injury after injury after injury that he became an afterthought and he wasn't able to get on the field. But he had a stretch there in his career, both towards the end of his tenure with the Cardinals and into his Buccaneers tenure, where he was a dominant force in the National Football League. But he played 174 games, finished with 483 tackles, which is not a great number, as you're going to see here in just a minute, 93 tackles for loss and 122 sacks. Now, you look at a guy like Jason Taylor, who played in 233 games, far more than Simeon Rice, 788 tackles, far more than Simeon Rice, 151 tackles for loss, way more, 139 and a half sacks, a little bit more. Michael Strahan, 216 games, a fake single season sack record, 854 tackles, 131 tackles for loss, 141 and a half sacks. So almost 20 more sacks than Simeon Rice. But you break it down a little bit further. Simeon Rice averaged 0.7 sacks per game. Jason Taylor, 0.59 sacks per game. Michael Strahan, 0.65 sacks per game. Simeon Rice, 8 seasons with double-digit sacks. Both Jason Taylor and Michael Strahan had 6, and they had far longer careers. So when you break it down almost that way, Simeon Rice hangs with first ballot Hall of Famers. But I think with his career being shortened due to injury and the lack of fanfare around, his performances while he did have that dominant stretch, I don't think Simeon is going to have the push for, a bid to the Hall of Fame the way a lot of fans wish he would.
All right, James. So wrapping up the Thanksgiving week, wrapping up this episode here in a minute. Thanksgiving has come and gone for my family. It's happening as people are probably listening and watching to this episode for you and your family, and hopefully you guys in the future. This is kind of a weird way, time warp to do this, but hopefully you guys are at this moment enjoying all kinds of good food, good treats, and family fun and time. It's perfect time for Built Bars. So James, if this dawns on you, if you think about today's episode, pull out some Built Bars, share them around the family, because even if you want dessert, it's still a good treat to add to the day. But if anybody out there is looking to count their calories, or maybe they're a little too full, but they still want something sweet, hand them a Built Bar. It's got slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. But most Built Bars, as you know, only have 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. So tell them to replace a coconut cream pie or the raspberry pie or the pumpkin pie with a Built Bar alternative. That alternative will be low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, covered in 100% chocolate. And it's a great option for any time you're hungry. Maybe your Aunt Beth, I don't know if you have an Aunt Beth, but if you do, maybe she hasn't tried Built Bars yet, and you can turn her on to her new favorite protein bar. New surprises coming all month. Built.com. You can always use promo code LOCK15. James, this weekend alone, Locked20 for 20% off at Built.com, and new flavors dropping for Black Friday. So guys, make sure you head over to Built.com. Check that out. Use a promo code this weekend for Lock20 for 20% off.
Yep, it is Thanksgiving weekend, and we all know what that means. Football. Congratulations to the Bears, Raiders, and Bills for their victories that have not happened.
Very bold of you, sir.
As we are recording this.
Speaking of talking into the future.
Well, no Cooper, no CD Lamb, no Alvin Kamara. The Bills are kind of due. I'm just
no Alvin, no Jameis, no Ryan Ramczyk, no Michael Thomas. Like, woo.
Yeah, I'm just saying, maybe I'm just trying to speak this into existence, but nothing goes better with football than turkey and betting. BetOnline has you covered all holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this Thanksgiving. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKEDON. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, even your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait. Take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. You might find yourself with a little extra Black Friday shopping money. Just saying. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, we are stuffed with deals this Thanksgiving. Wrapping things up here on a Friday edition of the Locked On Bucks podcast. James Yarcho, David Harrison on Twitter at @JYarcho_Bucks at DHarrison82. And real quick, David, I have problems with you. You are a dear friend.
Wait,
you are,
my wife on the show?
Do I?
So wait, is my wife on the show?
No,
just kidding. No. Just kidding. My mother-in-law and my son watch this show. Just kidding.
Yeah, dear friend, you're my brother, you're my partner in all this.
Aww. But such nice things you're saying to me right now.
You started a fight with me when I wasn't there to participate. And I was with you. I was with you on the Thanksgiving foods up until you said the words stovetop. Now, I love stovetop. Okay, I do. I will make it throughout the year. But when it comes to Thanksgiving, the stuffing needs to be special. And there's nothing special about stovetop. Also,
that's
pumpkin
false.
pie is the worst. friend of the show, Carmen Vitale agrees.
I don't know if that's true anymore. I'm just putting that out there.
Carmen Vitale agrees with me. She tweeted out that pumpkin does not belong in pie. So enjoy apple
And I
pie.
use
Enjoy
multiple
pecan pie.
accounts to come at her about it.
Yeah, and I didn't appreciate the Locked On Bucks account going after her. That's why I had to do it for my personal account to let her know that only half of this podcast disagreed with that take. So, all right, let's take a look at this weekend. Bucks, Colts. I will be there in attendance with my son and my boss and his son. Both of our sons are named Beckett, which is an interesting little thing because we didn't know each other when either of our sons were born. But we are going to go. We are going to have ourselves a good time. But he's a Colts fan, so there's going to be some trash talking going on. And if I want to be the one talking all the trash on the way home, this is what needs to happen for the Buccaneers. What it boils down to, it's all about Jonathan Taylor Thomas over there. Shout out to those of you that get that reference. The Buccaneers have to stop him, period. He is the Colts' key to victory. So the Bucs' key to victory has to be shutting him down. If the Colts do not have Quentin Nelson, that bodes well for the Buccaneers defense, where they have guys on the interior like Sue, like Vita Vea, that can blow up the offensive line and get contact on Taylor. I'm not going to say that they're going to take him down, but they can get enough contact on him to slow him down and allow help to arrive and minimize his gains. All right, so then you look to Lavonte David, you look to Devin White, who it was concerning when he missed practice. Wasn't sure if he was going to play. Now that he practiced on Thanksgiving, looks like he's going to be a go. But Lavonte, Devin, Sue, Vea, and then the rotation with Vea there with McClendon and Nacho, they have to get to Taylor early, slow him down enough for reinforcements to arrive and minimize Jonathan Taylor's ability to take over this football game.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Derrick Henry earlier in the episode, and look, not only is Jonathan Taylor the leading rusher in the NFL right now, he's the best running back in the NFL right now, and that includes Derrick Henry, who has 937 yards rushing right now to Jonathan Taylor's 1,122. But Derrick Henry's been out of action for like 2 or 3 weeks now, right? He still has, I just lost count, 26 more carries, James. Derrick Henry still has 26 more carries than Jonathan Taylor, even though he's missed, 2 weeks, 3 weeks right now? And Jonathan Taylor has 3 more touchdowns. So in more action, more opportunities, Derrick Henry still has less rushing production than Jonathan Taylor, even though he's missed the games now. So again, volume counts for a lot of things, right? And that kind of goes back to the defense conversation. We had this conversation earlier in the season about the Buccaneers defense. Yeah, they're giving it the most passing yards every single game because people are doing nothing basically but throwing on them. And what you want to see in this game is you want to see the Indianapolis Colts mimicking that, doing nothing but throwing on them. But you know they're going to want to run the ball. So how do you make them throw the ball, James? One, you stop Jonathan Taylor as best as you can. You stop him. You force them into 3rd and longs, 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9. You force them to throw the ball. 2, you score. You put points on the board, and Frank Reich is going to have no choice but to start putting the ball in the air because he's got to make up ground and make up ground quick. For the Buccaneers to do that, they have to do what they've been doing for really the last couple of weeks without the mistakes, which was last week against the New York Giants. Take what the defense gives you. Bruce Arians talked about it. Todd Bowles talked about it. Defenses are playing more 2-shell coverage over the Buccaneers. They're playing deep. They're forcing everything short, and then they're rallying to the ball, trying to make tackles, hoping for a tip pass that turns into an interception or a fumble that they can then give over to their offense. Do not shoot yourself in the foot. Continue to stay patient because these NFL players, they want to go for the kill. They want to go for it. They've been patient. This could be that game. It's a high-pressure game, very tough opponent. Playoff seeding is starting to be on the line. Divisional rankings are starting to be on the line, especially if the Saints lose. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers could find themselves being like, oh, this is a huge opportunity. Sometimes you get in your own emotions. You try to start forcing things down the field. Instead, stay patient, play within the system, take what they give you, put points on the board early. If you can put 17 points on the board in the first quarter, James, the Indianapolis Colts are going to have to pass the ball in the second half. That takes Jonathan Taylor out of the game for you and allows you to take advantage of Carson Wentz, who is poo-poo. My player of the game, because of that, is Vita Vea. I just had to throw that curveball in there. Vita Vea, okay, he's my player of the game for all the reasons you just said about stopping Jonathan Taylor. I think it's going to start with Vita Vea up front. If he can force those blockers, especially if Quentin Nelson does play, if he can force extra attention into the middle, allow your edge players to set the edge easier, it allowed the linebackers, Devin White, Lavonte David, to come in, Jordan Whitehead, Antoine Winfield Jr., et cetera, et cetera. So Vita Vea is the start of that whole thing, of course, assuming he's on the field.
Yeah, my predicted player of the game is going to be Sean Murphy Bunting. Look, Michael Pittman Jr., son of Buccaneers, former Buccaneers running back Michael Pittman, obviously, he's an absolute weapon. He is a beast. But if Sean Murphy Bunting is following Michael Pittman around and doing his best to shut Pittman down, that leaves the amazing pass catching options of old and busted T.Y. Hilton, who only performs against Houston.
So sad.
You got Zach Pascal and you got Baby Hands Doyle at tight end. Well, and then you have Mo Alley Cox, which, okay, it's kind of like Evan Ingram, only taller.
Look, he was an up and comer like 3 years ago.
Right? Yeah. Well, so was Evan Ingram. So yeah, you take Michael Pittman out of this game as far as a receiving threat, and the Buccaneers defense is going to have no problem. You have guys up front swarming to Jonathan Taylor, trying to remove the run game. As you mentioned, the offense get out to an early lead. You can remove the run game, force Carson Wentz to pass the ball, which Taylor's a threat out of the backfield, no doubt about it. But if you take away their number one option in Michael Pittman, there's not a whole lot of pass catchers on the Indianapolis Colts that are going to strike fear into anyone. It's going to be on Sean Murphy Bunting to have another really, really solid game, shut down Michael Pittman, and really force the Colts to do some creative things if they're going to move the ball. Finally, well, not finally, but that leads me into my bold prediction. You say Carson Wentz is poo-poo, but over the course of the last 6 games, he's got 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's only been sacked 6 times. You turn this into a one-dimensional team in the Indianapolis Colts on the offensive side of the ball. You can certainly force Carson Wentz into some mistakes. I think this Bucs defense ends the game with 3 takeaways and 5 sacks. This is going to be a statement performance by the Buccaneers defense, shutting down Taylor, getting to Carson Wentz, and taking the football away.
Yeah, you don't say. That's an interesting bold prediction. I also made the same bold prediction after I made the bold prediction that Bailey Adams pre-stole from me, meaning that Tom Cruise is on his way to arrest him for pre-theft. My bold prediction after finding out that I'm basically copying people without knowing what their bold predictions was is going to be Vita Vea getting 2 sacks. Vita Vea, my key player of the game. You guys know I like tying my bold prediction into either my key to the game or my player of the game. And again, Carson Wentz, if you force the ball into his hands, you force him to pass. One thing that he's known for is holding the ball too long. Vita Vea gets pressure up the middle. I could see him basically pushing a Colts lineman. Like, he could get 2 sacks, James, and never even touch Carson Wentz. That's how good Vita Vea can be. Hopefully that's what we're going to see in Indianapolis this weekend. And hopefully it leads to a Buccaneers win, which I am predicting Bucs by 3. I'm taking 7 points, 34-27. Tampa Bay gets their 8th win of the NFL season, takes a 3-game lead over the New Orleans Saints, and then we have to see what the Carolina Panthers do.
Well, the Carolina Panthers are going to lose because that's what's going to happen. It's going to be a tight one. This is going to come down to whoever has the ball last, and that could mean one of 2 things. It could mean that the Buccaneers are kicking a game-winning field goal, or there's going to be a defensive stand preventing the Colts from kicking a game-winning field goal, but I'm taking the Bucs in this one, 30-28. With that, David, we are out of here. Thank you to all of you once again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or first watch every day, free and available on all platforms. For your second listen today, we suggest the Locked On Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Drop your score predictions, your bold predictions, and your player of the game predictions in the comment section on YouTube. We would love to see that, see some interaction. You can let us know what you think about ours, and we want to see what yours are. So make sure you're doing that over on the YouTube comment section. Make sure you subscribe to the channel while you are there. You can send in your reactions to the game to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com or by calling in at 813-444-5841. Follow along on Twitter at LockedOnBucks, at JARCO_Bucks, at DHarrison82, and at Bucks_Nation. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, be good to one another. We thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucks.